Thank you, Justin Kosick. I sing that song in my head every time there's a looming government shutdown.
Yeah, well,
I think of it's the final countdown. Because, CNN's got their countdown clock, 39 hours, 15 minutes, and 31 seconds until the government shuts down.
Leave the singing to the former boy band member. That's our technical producer, Justin. So,
He was in Boys to Men, right? Well, actually, no.
Yeah, he's the forgotten member of Boys to Men. That's what he is. The government shutdown theater. Jim Jordan from the Freedom Caucus, state championship wrestler.
Oh, that's right. He still has a cauliflower ear.
From Ohio. He's a tough hombre, and he had this to say.
Yeah, he was on with Chris Cuomo on his new show.
Here's what I want. I want us to do what we told the American people we were going to do, what they elected us to do, fund defense, hold the line on non-defense, and do what the election was about on immigration. If the Democrats want to shut down the government because they want to give amnesty to people who came here illegally, then you can have them on your show and they can explain why that's the appropriate thing to do.
Ooh.
Just pinned him. There you go. Pretty good. Tim Carney, he's a senior political columnist for Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com, and he joins us now for more on this and a few other topics. Tim, thanks for being with us.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. So we're going to pretend nobody has any institutional memory in D.C. for this government shutdown theater, right? A government shutdown, which normally means, if I'm recalling correctly, 80% of the federal government's on autopilot and furloughed workers get back pay, and this lasts for a few days, and then we move on to the next thing.
Well, yeah, it's not a good way to pass legislation with the constant threat of a government shutdown, but it also is, as you're pointing out, government shutdown is itself a misnomer. What we call non-essential federal workers, they have unpaid leave, and then without fail, they get the back pay for the work they didn't do. And by the way, if I were looking for ways to save money, I might think, how many non-essential federal workers do we have?
Yeah, that's sort of it's sort of a flashing light, isn't it? If you're characterized as a non-essential worker, that maybe that's telling policymakers something.
Yeah, if they said, well, Amy, you're essential, but Dan, you're kind of non-essential host, so why don't you stay home today?
They have said that, actually.
That would tell us something.
All right, so Paul Ryan needs 216 Republican votes. But there's financial hawks and people from the Freedom Caucus who won't vote for it. And then the Democrats are trying to tie the government funding bill to DACA. So how do you see this playing out?
So as far as how it's going to play out, there's most of the time that this happens, in recent history, since Trump came in, the Freedom Caucus has proven actually more flexible. While back in the Obama era, you would find that there were just a bunch of guys who they weren't just no, they were heck no. And nowadays they're more willing to deal in such a way that they go to leadership and they say, if you can give us X, we will vote for this bill. And so we haven't. Some of the answers there have to do with the total funding level. It's not entirely clear what the Freedom Caucus is requesting now, and Ryan has shown a better ability to deal with them than John Boehner did. So that's what I think we're going to see is a Republican bill more than a bipartisan bill. And part of it is there's a sort of unspoken rule that's sensible, that the less reasonable side in these government shutdown debates are the ones demanding something that's not a pertinent rider, that's not about appropriations. That was Ted Cruz demanding a shutdown of Obamacare. These other things, the person asking for the extra policy rider usually is treated like the person making the more extravagant demand, and that strikes me as reasonable. These bills should be about funding the government, not about instituting policy.
And on the issue of a DACA border security deal, so much focus has been on the senators who went to Trump with this bipartisan deal that he rejected. Less focus, even though it was certainly part of the conversation in that remarkable hour-long televised tete-a-tete with the president and congressional leaders from both parties, is the Secure America's Future Act that was put together by Goodlatte, McCall, Labrador, and McSally in the House that includes actually what the president says needs to be included, as well as other immigration hawks like McCall and Labrador, frankly, which is increased border security and internal enforcement and dealing with chain migration, so DACA designees who get some kind of permanent status can't bootstrap the rest of their family in who did come here illegally through fault of their own. So there's this other deal on the table that's been proposed in the House.
Yeah, and so what we've editorialized on the Examiner basically is there should be an immigration bill. It should be separate from the government funding bill, and it should be making permanent DACA. That is, if you were brought into this country as a child and have followed the law, then we're going to give you permanent resident status because you've been living here for a long time and your life is built around here, and it wasn't because of some decision you ever made to break the law. And in exchange for that, a wall, more border security, and trading out the sort of chain migration and the visa and the green card lottery for something that's more skill-based. And I would even go smaller than that. I mean, I think the narrower the deal you cut on this, the better. And then there's tons of other things to fix on immigration. So have that be the next bill. Part of the thing that's killed immigration has been these plans have just expanded and expanded. Even the Goodlatte bill you mentioned, it includes stuff about E-Verify. It includes new classes of visas, and just that is we're getting too comprehensive. You guys remember the term comprehensive immigration reform?
Yes.
That should be a curse word now. Keep it as narrow as possible. Wall and DACA are the essential things. If we can do chain migration and visa lottery, let's do them too. But keep it narrow.
What about Jim Jordan's position, though? Hey, if the Democrats want to shut down the government over designations for DACA beneficiaries, then go ahead. They can make that case to the American people.
Well, the problem is, you can't make that argument unless you pass it through the House and you get 51 Republican votes in the Senate. And it's not clear that we're at that point now. The Republicans have the ability to pass a government funding bill through the House. The Republicans have the ability to get 51 votes in the Senate. Mm-hmm. If they pass a clean funding bill with a majority of Republicans, and then through the House, and then in the Senate they have 51 or more Republicans, and Democrats filibustered because it lacks a unrelated rider related to a different policy issue. At that point, I would say Jordan has a point. I don't think they're going to win the PR fight. I mean, a government shutdown always gets blamed on Republicans no matter what the fact of the matter is, just because that's the way our media environment is. But as far as sort of being in the right in an abstract way, for whatever that counts, I agree. Pass it through the House, and if you get 51 votes in the Senate because you're not sticking in immigration into a spending bill, then it would be impossible to rightly claim the Republicans.
So what happened to President Trump? I mean, a week ago, last Tuesday, he talked about, this bipartisan bill of love and put a bipartisan bill together. I'll sign it. I'll take the heat for it. And now who got to him, and how did he change his mind between Tuesday and Thursday?
I just think he's a mercurial man who is not detail oriented. So he says he wants something, and then he sits down after he talks about it, and he thinks about what he wants, and often he wants multiple things that don't go together at the same time. So I think he's a lot like the average voter. I go around the country, I talk to people, and they'll say two things that directly contradict each other. They want a balanced budget amendment, but they also want tax cuts and spending to go up. And I think that Donald Trump, because he's so new to politics, because the business he ran was fairly small, I think his mind is sort of all over the place. So that's when he's one place 1 week, the next place the next week. That's mostly what I chalk it up to.
Tim Carney from the Washington Examiner, who we're talking to. Tim, you're a man of letters. I'm sure you've read Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago.
Excuse me.
And in the distillation of the Soviet pogroms and under Stalin and so forth. So I was surprised because when I read it, I mean, this, of course, was before Trump was president, but Trump's presidency hadn't called to mind the Stalin regime until yesterday when Jeff Flake spoke to an empty Senate chamber and compared President Trump to Stalin, in addition to other modern-day despots. So it wasn't limited to Stalin, but it certainly included him. Could you help us? Is Trump on the path to instituting a Stalinist regime in America?
No, he is not. And as a journalist, as a writer, one of the things we do is we realize that sometimes saying something that in some precise, small detail, looking only at one particular thing might be true, that's not a productive way to talk, in part because it will lead people away from the truth. So if I were to say that Tom Selleck is like Hitler, because both men have mustaches, this is not a productive way of talking about Tom Selleck's character or appearance or anything like that. So to say that Stalin called the press the enemy of the people, and so did Trump, that's more significant than having a mustache. But it also it calls to mind all the other things that Stalin did, and it detracts. And actually, if you talk about these other people oppressing, whether it's in Turkey, Erdogan, or North Korea, or China, these other regimes that oppress media freedom, and in the context of Trump, what that does to me is that, A, tells me what a great system we have here, how amazing the First Amendment is, and B, tells me how sort of impotent and silly Trump's saber-rattling at the press is. Do you think that the press has been cowed by Donald Trump's talk? No. If anything, they've been revved up. They've been juiced up a little too much, I think. I think the media needs to calm down and stop the chest thumping and just get back to its work. Certainly, we're not seeing stories go unreported because of Donald Trump's threat. We're seeing quite the opposite. When Trump says he's going to take on the media, that gets ratings up, that gets these people's juices flowing, that gets more money flowing into the press. So when you want to compare us to other regimes, to where a president says mean things about the press, the main thing that does to me is say, wow, America really is the greatest country in the world because we are nothing like these other countries.
Now, just one point on the Selleck-Hitler comparison. Selleck is a Republican, so that basically makes
I guess
he's a Nazi.
Be an op-ed in the editorial in the New York Times.
Yeah, there you go. And that'll be a leading contender for the 2018 fakies that President Trump will distribute. He is Tim Carney, senior political columnist for the Washington Examiner. Tim, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Dan. Thanks, Amy.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
It's